had 166 members. The Farmers Bank, located where the First National Bank is now, offered to sell the lodge a metal safe for $50 FOB Bank, or for $60 delivered to the lodge room on the third floor of the Fraternal Inn building. On November the 5th, the lodge voted to let them deliver the safe and voted to pay the $60. On December the 15th, 1919, the city of Butler notified the lodge that effective January the 1st, 1920, the current being generated by the city-owned power plant would be changed from direct current to alternating current. Therefore, the fans and all the light bulbs would have to be changed. At their next meeting, January the 3rd, 1920, a committee was appointed to trade in the old fans for two new ones that would operate on the new current. At a cost of $87, they were replaced, the Royal Arch paying 1/4 of the cost. For 53 years, the various secretaries have served the lodge faithfully on a salary of $1 per night. At this meeting on December the 15th, 1920, it was voted to raise the secretary's salary to $2. On February the 23rd, 1921, something new was tried. They had the George Washington celebration in the daytime. The lodge convened at 9 a.m. There, 6 candidates were waiting to receive the Master Mason degree. Brothers Archie Biggerstaff, Clarence Bolden, Walter Remont, Claude McComb, Fred Wright, and Charles R. Maines. After the lodge was closed, the brethren proceeded to the Christian church, where the church ladies had prepared a splendid dinner. On March the 19th, 1921, the lodge voted to purchase savings certificates in the Butler Building and Loan Association. The matter of organizing a chapter of Jubilee for boys seemed to be meeting with unanimous approval and support of the lodge. On April the 2nd, 1921, an advisory board was appointed, which consisted of brothers James W. Harrison Chairman, Luther R. Twyman, Roy H. Beiser, Dr. T.W. Foster, Dr. H.M. Cannon, John Dearwester, Eugene K. Arnold, and William McAdoo. This chapter was active for several years, but finally surrendered their charter. Butler Lodge 254 AF&AM now had 183 members. On May the 5th, 1921, Butler Chapter UB, Order of the Eastern Star, was instituted in the hall of Butler Lodge number 254 AF&AM. The Grand Chapter granted Butler Chapter number 478, Order of the Eastern Star, a charter on October the 13th, 1921. Butler Chapter called a special meeting on October the 28th, 1921 to receive their charter. Sister Hattie Smith was the worthy matron, and Brother Frank Petit was the worthy patron. On November the 5th, 1921, it was voted to raise the dues from $4 to $4.50 per year. The fees for the degrees were raised too. On December the 19th, 1921, the lodge purchased a Monarch piano, the one we have now, from the Baldwin Piano Company in Kansas City for $225. The freight was $7 delivered to and set in the hall. Later, the secretary was authorized to sell the old organ for $7, which kept the price of the piano at its original selling price. On June the 27th, 1922, at the invitation of Crescent Hill Lodge number 368, we went to Adrian to participate in the ceremony of laying the cornerstone at their new high school. On July the 21st, 1923, it was voted to raise our dues to $5 per year. Early in the month of August 1925, a meeting was called here in Butler to discuss a proposed hospital. The city council, all of the fraternal organizations, the church board, and the school board were asked to send representatives to this meeting. Brother E.A. Reed was appointed to represent our lodge. On August the 15th, 1925, the lodge voted to go on record favoring a hospital in Butler, and that we agreed to lend our moral support to the same. Of course, most of us remember it was located at 107 South Havana Street, across from where Charlie Fisk lived and where Orville Jackson lives today. On September the 19th, 1925, Brother A.C. Culver was not at lodge. Upon inquiry, it was learned that this was the 50th wedding anniversary of Brother and Sister Culver. So the lodge voted to buy him a present to be selected by the master, Brother J.E. Zwalland. After lodge closed, the master went to the H.L. No drug and jewelry store and purchased the present. All of the brethren had come downstairs and were waiting for him. Then they marched to 312 West Ohio Street, where Brother Culver lived, and joined in the reception being held for them. The minutes say that it was late before Brother Culver retired that night. The last time the minutes mentioned paying a Tyler's salary was on February the 13th, 1926. At no time after the above date does the minutes mention discontinuing this practice. We now had 200 members. On October the 7th, 1928, was just one of the many sad days for Butler Lodge number 254. It was on that day that the master called the lodge into special communication for the purpose of conducting the last rites over the body of our late and respected brother A.C. Culver. The minutes state that when the brethren came downstairs, there was more than 75 master masons, many members of the Eastern Star, also many brothers and sisters from the Oddfellow and Rebecca lodges waiting to take part in the ceremony. The members of the three lodges and the Eastern Star chapter were formed in procession under the direction of the marshal and marched to the Presbyterian Church. There the religious services was conducted by Reverend Dickey and Reverend Brammer. The oration was delivered by the Honorable Carl J. Henry. The body laid to rest in Oak Hill Cemetery with Masonic services. The lodge was to become 64 years old before one of its masters would die in office. This happened in February 1931, when Brother Perry Bookman died of injuries as a result of an accident. Perhaps the largest funeral Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM ever participated in was on June the 25th, 1931. The lodge was called into special communication for the purpose of conducting Masonic services for Brother John E. Thompson. The funeral was held at Brother Thompson's home just north of Butler on North Main Street Road. Being a retired serviceman of our country's armed forces, an honor guard of about 50 soldiers was sent up from Nevada, Missouri's Camp Clark. The body was conveyed to Oak Hill Cemetery on a horse-drawn caisson. Major Brown of Camp Clark was in charge of the Masonic services, also the military services. Times were getting hard and money scarce in the early 1930s, so the lodge dues was lowered to $4, the secretary's salary cut to $1.50 per meeting night, and the telephone was taken out. At one time, the lodge suspended 29 members for non-payment of dues. During the worst part of the Depression, the lodge voted that if a brother could pay 1/2 of his dues, which was a little more than the per capita tax, he would be retained in good standing. Things began to look brighter in 1939. The lodge had their first joint installation with the Eastern Star on December the 8th, 1939. The telephone was replaced in May 1940. On October 18, 1941, the lodge accepted the invitation of Johnstown Lodge number 350 to consolidate with us. On June 19, 1943, the lodge voted to change their meeting night from Saturday to Friday night, where it remained to this day. Money was still more plentiful in the summer of 1945 when an appeal arrived from the Grand Master for assistance to our brethren in the Philippine Islands, where their country had been occupied by the enemy, the Japanese, of World War II. We voted to send the equivalent of 25 cents per member for that fund. The salary of the secretary was raised back to $2.50 per meeting. There was some talk about instituting a rainbow assembly for girls here in Butler, but that was to come later. On January the 17th, 1947, A motion carried that the Lodge give a Masonic Manual of Missouri to each brother who passed a satisfactory examination or proficiency in the Master Mason degree. In May 1947, the Lodge bought a new neon sign. However, because of a shortage of transformers, it was not installed until December. Members of our Lodge went to Rich Hill on June the 4th, 1948 to help the Rich Hill Brethren lay the cornerstone for the public library. In September 1948, the dues was raised by a vote of the Lodge from $4 to $5. In September 1949, committees from Butler Lodge number 254, OES chapter number 478, Bates Lodge 180, and Carnation Rebecca Lodge 238 agreed on the purchase of 48 folding chairs, said chairs to be stored in the Masonic Hall. The financial situation of the Lodge and the country was much improved by 1950, so the Lodge voted to remit the dues of any member who had belonged to the order of 50 years, also to present him with a 50-year pin. Still heating with coal, the Lodge wanted to change to gas heat. A committee was appointed to investigate, and finally on February the 16th, 1951, with the help of the Eastern Star and the Royal Arch chapter, they voted to buy 2 modern gas heaters and a small heater for the anteroom. Next was a carpet. This being no small matter, money-wise, it took several meetings before this could be worked out. There was something like $2,000 involved in this improvement. On December the 7th, 1951, it was voted to buy the new carpet with the help of the Eastern Star. The Lodge room was cleaned out of furniture and prepared for a complete redecorating job. Brother R.A. Ellis and his wife Mary offered to furnish the paint and varnish free of charge. Their offer was accepted. After the work was done, the new carpet laid and everything back in place, we still felt we had one of the nicest, if not the nicest, lodge hall between Kansas City and Joplin. But it was still upstairs, and many of the older members could not attend Lodge or the Eastern Star chapter. Many times during Lodge meetings, the conversation would turn to the subject of renting, buying, or building a new lodge hall on the ground floor. Some years was to pass before this dream would be realized. Our Lodge had had senior members' night back in the 1930s, but the first past master night was held January the 15th, 1954. All of the chairs were filled with past masters of the Lodge. The regular officers sat on the sideline. There were visitors from Nevada, Rich Hill, Amsterdam, Rockville, Adrian, Archie, and others. The meeting was such a success that it has been repeated several times. During the term of Brother Nabin Epperson as master, the subject of changing the Lodge year back to the calendar year was discussed. On February the 5th, 1954, it was voted to make the change. But on that same night, Brother Epperson submitted his resignation as master because, in his words, of working in Kansas City, he was unable to fill the office of Worshipful Master as it should be filled. Brother Robert L. Spurrier was elected to fill the master's chair for the interim period. We pause here to look back at the minutes of December the 17th, 1904, which says, "The petition of one Wesley Denton for the degrees was received." 52 years, 3 months, and 22 days later, March the 29th, 1957, the Master called a special open meeting for the purpose of presenting Brother Denton his 50-year pin. A little late, but a well-deserved honor. During the summer of 1959, I remember some talk about getting the hall air-conditioned, or at least buying some ventilating fans. However, no action was ever taken. On July the 17th, 1959, a committee was appointed to confer with the hospital board and county court relative to laying the cornerstone at the new Bates County Memorial Hospital to be located at 615 West Nursery Street here in Butler, Missouri. Everyone agreed, so on November the 6th, 1959, A special meeting was called for the occasion. The most worshipful Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri Masons, Brother Harold O. Gore, opened the lodge with the assistance of the brethren from Butler, Adrian, Amsterdam, Rich Hill, Hume, Foster, and Rockville. The Grand Master stated the purpose of the meeting, then lodge recessed. The procession formed on the Butler field, then marched to the hospital building where the Grand Master deposited the stone in due and ancient form. The brethren returned to the lodge hall where the Grand Master made some appropriate remarks. Then lodge was closed. Through the years, we have kept our promise of presenting 50-year pins as they come due. On June the 17th, 1960, we presented Brother John B. Bradley his, and on November the 25th, 1960, Brother E.C. Harper received his. On May the 19th, 1961, while Brother Elmo Giner was master, there was some discussion relative to the Eastern Star wanting to organize a rainbow assembly for girls. Our lodge was in favor of the proposed assembly and voted to make our hall available free of charge to the Rainbow Girls. Quoting one line from the minutes of May 19, 1961, and I quote, that this lodge go on record as being prepared to support said assembly. End of quote. In May 1961, the Secretary read an invitation from Foster Lodge number 554 requesting our presence at the dedication of their new hall in June. Several of the brethren expressed a desire to attend. On June the 4th, 1961, Most Worshipful Brother Bruce H. Hunt, Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri Masons, dedicated their hall in the presence of a large crowd. On August the 20th, 1961, Butler Assembly UD, Order of the Rainbow for Girls, was instituted with 26 charter members. On December the 5th, 1961, Brother D.O. Bradley received his 50-year pin. During the year 1962, while Brother Wilbur L. Taylor was master, our bylaws was revised, the hall completely redecorated, and Butler Lodge 254 voted on May the 4th, 1962, to present the Rainbow Girls with their first altar cloth. Our lodge was busy that year conferring degrees, conducting funerals, and in some cases offering aid and assistance to those less fortunate than we. In January 1962, our membership was 169 members, but we had a nice increase that year. At the Grand Lodge session in 1962, it was voted that hereafter the lodges would not have to open on special communication before conducting memorial services for the funeral. On December the 29th, 1962, Brother Leonard C. Miller was installed master by Most Worshipful Brother Martin B. Dickinson, Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri Masons. This was the second time in the history of Butler Lodge number 254 that its officers had been installed by the Grand Master. The first time was December the 27th, 1869. A nice crowd was in attendance where the Rainbow Girls put on their drill. Butler Chapter number 478, Order of the Eastern Star, conferred the 7th degree on the new master, followed by a short program of entertainment. The lodge was honored that night by having present 9 of the 12 50-year members of the order in Bates County. On March the 28th, 1963, the Supreme Assembly issued a charter for Butler Assembly number 86, Order of the Rainbow for Girls. Butler Lodge number 254, AF&M, was happy to present the Assembly a check for $20 to cover the cost of their charter. On April the 19th, 1963, the Master and his 2 wardens went to the home of Brother A.L. Rook and presented him with a 50-year pin. It being exactly 50 years to the day since our lodge had raised Brother Rook to the sublime degree of a Master Mason. The reason this was not done in the lodge room was because the brother was unable to climb the stairs. On September the 16th, 1963, the Master's birthday, he presented the lodge an electric clock as a token of appreciation for having been elected to serve as his master. On December the 20th, 1963, the Lodge voted for the first time to make a contribution of $50 to the Butler Association of Churches to help buy Christmas baskets for the needy families of our city. Brother Kermit C. Simon, the next master, was installed at a public installation on December the 28th, 1963. He had served just one meeting in the chair when he was stricken with illness and was confined in a hospital and at home for several months. Senior Warden Brother Robert E. Miller and others acted as master until Worshipful Master Brother Salmon was able to return to his chair. Everyone helped with the degree work or wherever needed. On June the 19th, Brother Salmon returned to the Lodge and assumed the station as master. The year 1964 showed increase in membership. On December the 26th, 1964, Brother Robert E. Miller was installed master of the Lodge. This too was a public installation, but somewhat different. After the officers of Butler Lodge No. 254 AF and AM were installed, a recess was called for the purpose of installing the officers of Mine or Royal Arch Chapter No. 76. The minutes state that the new master gave a brief history of the Lodge and made mention of the fact that he was the 70th man to become master of Butler Lodge No. 254. A brief musical program was presented by the new master's wife, Charlotte, and her sister, Miss Paula Underwood. Even though the minutes don't mention the age of the previous master, to this date, Brother Robert E. Miller was the youngest man to serve as master. He was 31 years old. Each year since the institution of Butler Assembly No. 86, Order of the Rainbow for Girls, Butler Lodge No. 254 made a practice of presenting them with a gift, usually something they needed or something could be used during their deliberation. The year 1965 was no exception. The Lodge voted to have the letterhead stationery printed for the girls. We gave $50 to the Butler Association of Churches for their Christmas fund and sent a Christmas present to J.P. Watson, our member who is a resident of the Masonic home in St. Louis. On December the 18th, 1965, Brother Quentin H. Compton was installed master at a public installation. His wife, Blanche, presented him with a gavel and sounding block to be used during his term. On February the 4th, 1966, Butler Lodge No. 254 paid its last funeral account for a brother. Our brother in the Masonic home, J.P. Watson, passed away and was buried in Osceola, Missouri. The Lodge also paid for having the last inscription put on the stone. On March the 4th, 1966, the Lodge voted to have the 5 walnut chairs, officers' chairs, repaired and reupholstered at a cost of $128.65. This was the first time a committee had been appointed to contact Masons in regard to giving blood to the blood bank. The Fraternity and Association doubled the rent in June 1966, so now we were paying $40 per month. On December the 17th, 1967, Brother Earl Farrell Atkins was installed master of the Lodge. Once again, the Lodge began to think of owning their own building. The Eastern Star and Royal Arch chapters began paying rent to Butler Lodge No. 254. On March the 3rd, 1967, the master appointed a building committee comprised of brothers Elmer J. Campbell, John C. Miller, and Richard A. Ellis, the secretary. The first rent received from the above-mentioned chapters was a total of $120. $80 being drawn from the general fund made a total of $200 for the building fund. In August 1967, the master, Brother Atkins, had his 31st birthday. Thus, he now had the honor of being the youngest master in the 99-year history of Butler Lodge No. 254. He was only 30 years old at the time of his installation. At this writing, November 1968, Brother Atkins still holds distinction. Throughout the summer of 1967, hopes were high that somehow the Lodge would find a way to leave the high rent behind and start to buy their own hall. Since the Oddfellows had their rent raised too, it was only natural for the committees of both lodges to work together to secure another meeting place. Over the years, the two lodges had shared the same building or the same hall, so no problem should be encountered there. First to be considered was the Assembly of God Church at 404 East Dakota Street. However, the lodge felt that this building was not suited for lodge purposes. On November the 17th, 1967, the lodge committee reported that the Oddfellows had approached the owner of the Wines building, situated at 203-205 West Dakota Street, Butler, Missouri, and that the building could be bought for $10,000. With a great deal of emphasis, the owner made it clear that this price was being offered only to Base Lodge number 180 IOOF and Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM. Otherwise, there would be $15,000. The master felt it wise to table the discussion until a larger crowd was present. At the meeting on December the 1st, 1967, a much larger crowd was present. The discussion turned again to the proposal of the Oddfellows that the two lodges jointly purchase the Wines building for the above stated price and convert it into two separate rooms. I now quote from the minutes of December the 1st, 1967. Motion was made and seconded that Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM approve the purchase of the Wines building in conjunction with Base Lodge number 180 IOOF for the price of $10,000, subject to the approval of the Advisory Board of the Grand Lodge, also with the approval of the District Deputy Grand Master. Motion carried unanimously. End of quote. The Master appointed the following committees of four to check further into the proposed purchase of the building and report back to the Lodge. Brothers Harold A. Kaiser, Charles W. Ott, Robert L. Spurrier, and Richard A. Ellis, the Secretary. The committee from both lodges immediately contacted the owner of the building and negotiations began at once. Should the Wines building be purchased, it would be necessary to erect a partition down through the middle so each lodge would have their individual lodge room. I now quote from the minutes of the same meeting. It was moved, seconded, and carried that Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, give Base Lodge number 180 IOOF their choice of selection of the halls, east or west side, since it was through their efforts that Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM was given the opportunity in purchasing the building. End of quote. The time had come for election of officers. The centennial year officers of Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM and serving at this time in November 1968 are as follows: Frank E. Davis, Worshipful Master; Buford L. Jessup, Senior Warden; Harold A. Kaiser, Junior Warden; Richard A. Ellis, Secretary; Albert Earl McCann, Treasurer; Buford A. Padley, Senior Deacon; Jack C. Zellman, Junior Deacon; Jesse A. Bud Cooper, Senior Steward; Harold L. Neeson, Junior Steward; Earl Farrell Atkins, Chaplain; Leonard C. Miller, Tyler; and Robert E. Miller, Marshal. I would like to devote this paragraph to Brother Charles W. Ott and his wife, Myrtle. Brother Ott is a past master of Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM and a past officer of Base Lodge number 180 IOOF. Sister Myrtle is a past matron of Butler Chapter number 478, Order of the Eastern Star, and a past officer of Coronation Rebecca Lodge number 238 IOOF. Naturally, they were aware of the desire in both organizations to have their own halls. When it became evident that Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM and Base Lodge number 180 IOOF were going to purchase the Wines building, it seemed both lodges were going to be short of funds to make the necessary alterations. Brother and Sister Ott notified the lodges they were in a position to contribute a certain amount of money towards the purchase of the building and would do so at once. Without their help, this lodge, as we see it today, would hardly have been possible. The four organizations meeting in these two halls, Butler Lodge number 254 AF and AM, Butler Chapter 478, Order of the Eastern Star, Base Lodge 180 IOOF, and Coronation Rebecca Lodge number 238 IOOF, have expressed their appreciation to Brother and Sister Ott many different ways. The Bible says it is more blessed to give than to receive. Truly they have exemplified the works of the Good Samaritan. They did not pass on the other side. To them, Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, says in the simplest terms, thank you. We hope we prove worthy of your trust. A stated communication of Butler Lodge number 254 was held on December the 15th, 1967. The secretary was instructed to send Brother Charles W. Ott and his wife a thank you letter for the generous contribution to the lodge. The motion was made and seconded that the building committee be empowered to purchase the wine building to be jointly owned by Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, and Bates Lodge number 180, IOOF. Also, same committees to enter into an agreement with Bates Lodge number 180 as to the upkeep, maintenance, and of building, utilities, insurance, and so forth. Motion carried.
Again, we pause to turn the tape over.
Since the lodge was going to be a property owner, it was necessary to elect 3 trustees. The following brothers were elected: Harold A. Kaiser, 1 year; Charles S. Kersey for 2 years; and Richard A. Ellis for 3 years. The saving certificates the lodge had with the Butler Building and Loan Association had to be withdrawn and deposited as a checking account at the First National Bank. After all this business was transacted, they proceeded to have installation of officers. Brother Frank E. Davis, our present master, and all the other senior officers were installed at this closed meeting. District Deputy Grand Lecturer Brother Ralph O. Fritz acting as installing master, and District Deputy Grand Master Brother James Bradley acting as installing marshal. At the meeting on January the 5th, 1968, Chairman Kaiser reported that the wines building had been purchased by the 2 lodges as of December the 30th, 1967. Brother Charles S. Kersey immediately presented the lodge a $100 check to help with expenses. This being our centennial year, the master appointed the following brothers on the Centennial Committee: Charles W. Ott, Wesley Denton, and A.B. Cummins. The following brothers were appointed to write the history of the lodge: Leonard C. Miller, Buford A. Padley, and William Wendell Park. The lodge had plenty of unfinished business to take care of now. 2 partitions had to be removed and another one built down through the center of the hall. The new one had to be soundproof. The air conditioner and furnace was moved to the basement. Air ducts had to be taken down from the ceiling and reinstalled in the center partition. The hall had to be rewired, cabinets built in the kitchen, and the ladies' restroom provided where the furnace had been. Some plumbing was to be done. Many of the brethren contributed time, labor, and material, which was of considerable value. The ladies from the Eastern and Rebecca's would bring coffee and sandwiches to the workmen in both halls. It would have been difficult to distinguish Masons from Oddfellows. Members of each lodge would help the other whenever possible. During these busy times, both lodges still met on their regular meeting nights. Butler Lodge 254 voted to donate a deceased brother's wife $50. After making several attempts to carry out the lodge's instructions, the secretary reported he was unable to locate the lady, so the check was canceled. Butler Lodge did not hold its annual George Washington banquet this year. Instead, it was held at Crescent Hill Lodge, number 368, at Adrian. After the paneling was on, the ceiling painted, and all the woodwork varnished, the carpet was laid. The dining room came in for its share of attention, too. The city of Butler installed a new Mercury street light on the northwest corner of the building. Butler Lodge No. 254, AF&AM, held a public ceremony of dedication on May the 12th, 1968. About 120 members and guests were present. District Deputy Grand Master James Padley from Rich Hill Lodge No. 479 presided at the dedication. The first meeting held in the new hall was on May the 17th, 1968. The official address of Butler Lodge No. 254 AF&AM and the new Masonic Temple is 203 West Dakota, Butler, Missouri. The post office gives the address of Base Lodge 180 out of OF as 205 West Dakota, Butler, Missouri. In a very real sense, the two lodges are still together. At this time, there is still some work to be done whenever the weather permits. The basement stairway is almost completed. An outside stairway is to be built on the south side of the building. An outside door will be put in the southwest corner of the basement. Butler Lodge 254 still has a metal safe and some other articles in the old hall on the third floor of the inn building. A lodge history would be incomplete without giving credit to those faithful workers of the past. Just a few recorded in our minute books are brothers Austin, Van Dyke, Holloway, Sprague, Donovan, Deerwester, Kip, McAlley, Ellis, Benton, Twyman, Wadley, Rooks, Pipes, and others. Brother A.L. McBride served as treasurer 15 consecutive years. Brothers A.H. Culver and Barn Pipes, each secretary 12 consecutive years. Brother B.F. Roseman served as Tyler 27 consecutive years. Many distinguished citizens have been members of our lodge, including David A.D. Orman, Walter W. Graves, James L. Pace, John T. Smith, Harvey C. Clark, and others. The only one to attain distinction in the Grand Lodge was Flevis J. Taggart. He served as Grand Master of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Missouri for the year 1897 and 98. It was during his administration as Grand Treasurer of the Grand Commandery of Missouri that the Masonic Home was established in St. Louis. Butler Lodge No. 254 has been a very liberal patron of the home for the last 79 years. The statistics of our lodge are quite simple, yet I believe should command the respect and admiration of all the brethren. From the time of institution, July the 25th, 1867, to the present date, November 15th, 1968, the result of our labors are as follows. Stated communications, 1,854. Special or call communications, 624. Funerals conducted, including in the 624, are 165. Conferred the entered apprentice degree 516 times. Conferred the fellowcraft degree 458 times. Conferred the master mason degree 423 times. Total meetings, stated, special, or called, 2,478. Total degrees conferred, entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master mason, 1,397. The largest membership our lodge ever enjoyed in 1928 when it reached 200 members in good standing. During the 100 years of its existence, we have conferred many degrees for other lodges. Thus, we have the history of Butler Lodge No. 254 AF&AM for the first 100 years. Starting in its infancy with little or no funds, meeting in an ancient frame building with sawdust on the floor, having a coal stove for heat and kerosene lamps for lighting. Today, we celebrate our centennial. Our home is a modern air-conditioned hall equipped with electric lights, central heating, and a carpet, not sawdust, that cost more money than the entire building and lot did where we were instituted. It is with a sense of pride and satisfaction that the brethren call this our hall. It really is our hall because we own it. During the past century, Butler Lodge No. 254, any other organization, has had its ups and downs. It has received well over 1,500 petitions, either for the degree or for affiliation. It has assisted a number of new lodges to organize in their respective communities. The lodge has responded to many appeals for assistance, not only to its members, but to many other organizations and individuals. Yet it has been both praised and condemned by the public. But after all, its influence on the community has been good. The lodge has always favored every movement for morality and righteousness, and has been a guiding light in many times of adversity and despair. The teachings of Freemasonry tend to elevate men above the selfishness and greed of the world at large. It also strengthens them in every laudable undertaking. In union there is strength, and today our lodge is strong. The social features of our lodge tend to make us better acquainted with each other and inspire us to more lofty ideals. May it ever live and prosper as it has in the past 100 years.
And now it gives me to read the names of those distinguished brethren who have served in the Worshipful Master's chair to date. Our first Worshipful Master, and the one who served in 1867 and 1868, was John H. Frizzell. 1869, Dr. A.S. Martin. 1870 and 71 and 72, Fleming V. Holloway. 1873, Flevis J. Tigard. 1874 and 1875, William E. Tucker. 1876 and 1877, Flevis J. Tigard. 1878, William Page. 1879, William W. Ross. 1880, William E. Tucker. 1881, Francis C. Smith. 1882, Omar D. Austin. 1883, Allen J. McBride. 1884, William W. Ross. 1885, Robert H. Abbott. 1886, Omar D. Austin. 1887, DeWitt C. Mize. 1888, George M. McKissick. 1889, John T. Smith. 1890, William W. Ross. 1891, Omar D. Austin. 1892, William W. Ross. 1893, Omar D. Austin. 1894, M. Fulkerson. 1895, James C. Clark. 1896, Charles Sprague. 1897, Rudolph Talbot. 1898, Albert L. Fox. 1899, A. L. McAlley. 1900, Elmer D. Kipp. 1901, John S. Francisco. 1902, Dr. Harry M. Cannon. 1903, Andrew B. Ludwig. 1904, Rudolph Talbot. 1905, Charles Dixon. 1906, William F. Hemstreet. 1907 and 1908, George E. Cable. 1909, Frank H. Crowell. 1910, Claude Frazier. 1911, Richard F. Lyle. 1912, Frank T. Clay. Then the lodge changed to the physical year. The first half of 1913, Herman O. Maxey. The last half of 1913, Wesley Denton. In 1914, Wesley Denton. 1915, Charles A. Allen. 1916, William G. Dillon. 1917, James A. DeArmond. 1918, Charles E. Culver. 1919, Wilbur E. Walton. 1920, James W. Harrison. 1921, Eli A. Reed. 1922, John S. Newland. 1923, William L. Coonrod. 1924, for the first half, Reverend Thomas C. Brammer. 1924, the last half, Irie L. Sutton. 1925, William H. Wadley. 1926, John E. Zwalland. 1927, Jacob R. Baum. 1928, Luther R. Twyman. 1929, Howard A. Ellis. 1930, Elmer B. Butler. 1931, Perry Burquin. 1932, Roy C. Baker. 1933, Lester Maddox. 1934, Sanford L. Rook. 1935, Robert R. Lotspeech. 1936, Charles E. Trosper. 1937, Charles W. Wolfe. 1938, Hobart C. Nicolay. 1939, Carl E. Stokes. 1940, Sanford L. Rook. 1941 and 1942, Charles E. Trosper. 1943, Robert S. Trumbull. 1944, William H. Wadley. 1945, Elmer J. Camel. 1946, Charles W. Ott. 1947, Lloyd W. Brooks. 1948, Pete Thorpe. 1949, Richard A. Ellis. 1950, Austin K. McNay. 1951, Charles S. Kersey. 1952, Byron C. Pipes. 1953, Mayburn Epperson. Then the lodge changed back to the calendar year. 1954, Robert L. Spurrier. 1955, John C. Miller. 1956, Eddie L. Dodds. 1957, Dudley O. Bradley. 1958, Robert G. Hatton. 1959, Charles H. Boyd. 1960, Marvin C. Durst. 1961, Elmo F. Ginter. 1962, Wilbur L. Taylor. 1963, Leonard C. Miller. 1964, Kermit C. Salmon. 1965, Robert E. Miller. 1966, Quentin H. Compton. 1967, Earl Farrell Atkins. 1968, and the present master, Frank E. Davis. On behalf of the Worshipful Master, Wardens, and Brethren of Butler Lodge No. 254, AF and AM, this is Leonard C. Miller saying we hope you have enjoyed listening to this tape. Thank you. This is your narrator, Leonard Miller, again. The date is March 7, 1982. On January 18, 1974, the Worshipful Master appointed a committee to write a supplement to the Lodge history. And now it gives me pleasure to introduce Brother Richard C. Sutton, who will be the narrator for this portion of our history. Richard?
Thank you, Brother Millard. This is a 12-year supplement to the history of Butler Lodge No. 254, Ancient Free and Accepted Masons, Butler, Missouri. To the Worshipful Master, Wardens, and Brethren, on January 18, 1974, Worshipful Master Charles H. Boyd appointed a committee of 3 to write a supplement to the Lodge history. This committee consisted of Brothers Leonard C. Miller, James T. Farnstock, and Terry B. Boyd. No effort will be made by this committee to explain why a time lapse of nearly 6 years occurred before we finally fulfilled our mission. Since the committee had not been released by succeeding masters, we felt it our duty to comply with Worshipful Master Boyd's request, so we offer the following for your consideration. Near the end of the original history, mention was made of the work to be done whenever the weather permits. This included the basement stairway, which was almost done, and an outside stairway to be built on the south end of the building. The lodge still had a metal safe and some other articles in the old hall on the 3rd floor of the fraternal inn building. Then the statistics of the lodge were given, such as the number of meetings held, degrees conferred, etc. After dedicating the hall on May 12, 1968, we start this supplement with the first meeting held in the new hall on May 17, 1968. The meeting was opened in the usual form with Worshipful Master, Brother Frank E. in the chair. When he asked for any bills, the secretary responded, and we quote, "We have the following bills. Lumber bill of $960.53, one half the cost of the million for the kitchen, which was $52.56, and $40 May rent on the old hall at the Fraternal Inn Association. A total of $1,053.09, end of quote. You had to pay rent on the old hall because the lodge still had a metal safe and other articles which had not yet been removed. The bills were allowed, but money was something we didn't have for any future expenses. About everything in the way of money had been spent purchasing the building and paying bills to pay. At this same meeting, Brother Earl McCann made a motion that the building committee met with the Odd Fellows relative to the work to be done in the basement. This included finishing up the stairway, moving the furnace to the basement, and getting all the ductwork done. Also, the air conditioner, which had previously shared what is now the ladies' restroom with the furnace, was to be moved outside. Motion carried. At the next meeting, on June 7, 1968, a motion was properly made and seconded and carried that the trustees be authorized to borrow enough money from the First National Bank of Butler to cover all outstanding bills. This was done. While we were still meeting in the old hall, Acting Master Brother Phil Atkins, on January 19, 1968, appointed a committee to write the history of our lodge. Also, he appointed a committee of Centennial Committee of 3. Brothers Charles W. Ott, Wesley Denton, and Andrew B. Cummings to make advanced preparations for the upcoming celebration. At the meeting on September 6, 1968, the men state, and here we quote, "A discussion was held of the coming centennial in November of the Butler Lodge, and the following members were added to him: Brother Ott, who is chairman, Brother Charles S. Curley, Anna J. Campbell, and Dr. Robert G. Hatton. Also, a committee was appointed to work with the Odd Fellows to secure a stairway for the back of the building." End of quote. The minutes of October 18, 1968 state that Worshipful Master Brother Frank E. Davis and Brothers Anna J. Campbell, Charles S. Covey, and the Secretary Richard A. Ellis had recently attended the centennial celebration of Lee Summit Lodge No. 263 to get an idea of how a centennial program should be presented. The only bill that night was for one half the cost of the carpet, which had recently been put in the ladies' restroom. No amount was posted. Since the late 1950s, annual dues had remained at $7. At this meeting, a proposal was presented in writing to amend the bylaws to read, annual dues will be $10. Also, the secretary was instructed to send the city of Butler a thank you letter for the new Mercury street light, which had been installed at the northwest corner of the building. On November 1st, 1968, meeting was devoted almost exclusively to the upcoming centennial celebration, which was to be held on November 22nd, 1968. The only other business transacted was to sell the 2 gas heating stoves which had previously been used in the old hall. On November 15th, 1968, the master appointed brothers Robert L. Taylor and Jack C. Zellner to help him move the remaining lodge property from the old hall. Centennial celebration. Contrary to the usual practice in this area of having open public meetings when a lodge celebrated its centennial anniversary, this was a closed meeting. The lodge was open on the 3rd degree. The master brother Frank E. Davis stated the purpose of the meeting, then introduced the master of ceremonies for the evening, Brother Robert G. Hatton. Our 4 50-year members were then introduced. They were brothers Wesley Benton, John V. Padley, Judge E. C. Harper, and W. E. Kinney. The only Grand Lodge officers presented were District Deputy Grand Master, Brother James Padley, from the Chair Lodge number 479, and District Deputy Grand Lecturer, Brother Ralph O. Fritz, from Lodge number 141 at Amsterdam. All past masters of the lodge were introduced. Both banks in Butler sent centennial gifts. The First National Bank gives a centennial plaque for gathering a lodge emblem. The Butler State Bank sent a beautiful 50-star United States flag and a photocopy of the lodge history. A recess was declared so that C.A. Moore from the Bates County News headliner could be admitted to take some photographs. The gavel sound being the recess, at which time the committee who had written the lodge history and had put it on tape was introduced. Excerpts from the history was then played. We now quote from the minutes of November 22nd, 1968. At this time, a team from the Scottish Rite Bodies from Kansas City, Missouri, was introduced and presented a play entitled The Greatest of These, which was very much enjoyed by all present. This having completed the evening's entertainment, the Centennial Committee, consisting of the following members: Sam Kersey, Charles W. Ott, and Alma Jane Campbell, were given a vote of thanks for the fine work they had done in preparing the program for this 100th year of our lodge. After a closing prayer, the lodge closed and refreshments were served in the dining hall to the visitors and members. End of quote. At the meeting of December 6, 1968, we started our second century by raising the annual dues from $7 to $10, effective January 1st, 1969. Brother Leonard C. Miller was given permission to use our lodge history for the purpose of compiling a history for the Odd Fellows Lodge. The election of officers resulted in the election of the following brothers: for Master, Alfred L. Jessup; Senior Warden Buford A. Padley; Junior Warden Jack C. Zellner; Treasurer Earl McCann; and Richard A. Ellis for Secretary. Before the lodge was closed, a motion was made, seconded, and carried that the lodge pay for a photograph of our centennial master, Brother Frank E. Davis, and that said photograph be hung in the lodge room.
Cabinet to keep our excellent records and minute books in. A committee consisting of brothers Jack C. Zellmer, H. Bart Cox, and Richard A. Ellis, the secretary, was appointed to shop around and report their findings. A motion was made and seconded that the Eastern Star chapter members, the Odd Fellows and Rebeccas, be invited to attend a meeting in our hall, at which time the lodge history tape would be played. Refreshments would be served by our own committee. Motion carried. Over the years, Butler Lodge number 254 had always hosted the Washington Day banquets, 1968 being the exception. On January 17, 1969, it was voted to have the banquet on February 21, 1969, but because of the indebtedness occurred in purchasing the new hall, along with the necessary improvements, it was voted to ask each lodge in the district to contribute $7.50 to help defray expenses. On February 7, 1969, a bill of $30 for material to finish the basement stairway and outside door in the basement was presented and was ordered paid. Brother John C. Millard of our lodge and Lee H. Vanoy of the Oddfellows had done the work. The first Washington Day banquet was held in the new hall was on February 21, 1969. The lodge was opened on a special called meeting at 6:30 p.m., then recessed for the banquet. The Eastern Star ladies served the dinner. Promptly at 7:30 p.m., labor resumed, and the senior deacon found a brother by the name of James E. Wolfe, a fellow craft, in waiting to be raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. The visitors' register showed brothers attending from Adrian, Rich Hill, Appleton City, Raytown, and Lacine, Kansas. By the first part of 1969, our lodge finances were beginning to get back to normal. The increase in dues helped to pay off some of the debts incurred during the past year. We didn't lose any members because of the increase in dues. In fact, new members were petitioning the lodge in even greater numbers. On April 4, 1969, the secretary read an invitation from the ladies of the Eastern Star chapter, inviting us to participate in a card party being held in the dining room on April 16th. The lodge accepted. Things were still looking brighter by the next meeting, April 19th, 1969, because the secretary presented the lodge with a check from the Eastern Star in the amount of $100, which was a donation they wanted to give the Masons. A motion was made, seconded, and carried that we put this money on our loan at the First National Bank. It was also voted to purchase one half of the 18 chairs from the Royal Neighbors Lodge, provided the Oddfellows and Rebecca's bought the other half. This would increase the seating capacity in the dining room to 75. The other lodges cooperated, so the chairs were bought.
To continue hearing the history of our lodge, please turn to tape number 4, side number 1.